Welcome to the lesson on the NLP presuppositions. Presupposition is a fancy term for an assumption, a pre-assumption, or a belief. And the NLP presuppositions are essentially a collection of useful beliefs. They are useful to hold if you wish to create transformational change with someone. So let's go through the main ones one by one. The map is not the territory. We've talked about this in quite a bit of detail because it comes out of one of the most foundation concepts, the structure of subjective experience. And in a nutshell, when the map is not the territory, you understand that you have only got an internal representation of the external reality. It makes sense that other people will have a different interpretation of the same territory. The thing you need to understand is not that any one map is true or truer than another, so much as that different maps are useful for different purposes. So the map that you can get on your phone on Google Maps, which shows you where you are and will even show you what route to take to get to where you want to go, is really useful for finding your way around. The version that came out with it originally, which was the photo of the bird's eye view, was pretty irritating when the app used to flash to that when you were trying to find your way around, because the bird's eye view was possibly really useful for knowing what it's like to be a bird in that particular place, but not very useful for finding your way around if you are lost. So if you understand that both types of maps on the phone were representations of exactly the same geography or territory, but one representation was more useful for a particular outcome than another, then you can understand this NLP presupposition that there are many, many ways to represent the external world or the territory, and different maps create very different outcomes. This gives us the freedom to make choices. If our map isn't working for us, if the meaning we're creating isn't working for us because the outcomes we're getting are not what we want, then we can look to changing the map, our own meanings, to create different outcomes in our own world. Everybody has the resources they need, they are just not accessing them. This comes from a fundamental assumption that we are born powerful, intelligent, brilliant human beings, and that we do not always access everything that we're capable of. So a key principle of working with someone in coaching is to believe that they have their own answers, and our role is just to facilitate them to find them, not to give them advice. This presupposition is absolutely core to that, to understanding that when they access the right resources within them, it may be the right beliefs or the right meanings or the right states, then things that may seem completely impossible become possible. So this understanding that the role is very much about helping people access resources that they may be unconscious of is core to NLP. The mind and body are connected. And this may sound pretty obvious now in this point in history, but in the 70s, this was a little bit surprising. Nowadays, I think we're all pretty clear that the nervous system and neurology isn't just in our head, it's throughout our whole body, and that when we think something, it's reflected in our body, that our feelings are not just in our head, they're in our whole body. So the mind and body are completely connected, certainly lines up intuitively with what a lot of people experience. They experience their emotions physically in their body, not as a concept in their head. There's a lot of evidence that when you think something is reflected in small movements, perhaps micro movements or changes physically, and this is the basis of nonverbal communication. So the mind and body are connected is a presupposition that explains why we're so interested in nonverbal communication. There's another one that's similar which says that the body speaks first, which is why we take notice of nonverbals in NLP. The meaning of the communication is the response that it elicits. This is one that some people might find a bit tricky, because often when we think about communication, we just think that we send a message and the intention of that message is the communication. In fact, communication involves two parties, and it's the message that's received that is actually the meaning of that whole communication. So if the person does not receive the message that you intended, the idea is, instead of making them wrong, to think about how to be more flexible and send the message in a different way. To understand that you could say one thing to one person, and thanks to the whole process of meaning making and filters, it may mean one thing, and then to another person the exact same statement will mean something else. So the meaning is actually what lands on the other end, which is why when we want to say something important, it's better to say it in person where you can see what happens, how it's received. Every behaviour has a positive intent for the person doing the behaviour. Notice it says for the person doing the behaviour in italics. What this means is that every single behaviour we have has a positive intent at a deep level, perhaps unconsciously, often unconsciously, for ourselves. So even behaviours that we experience as self-sabotaging, things that we don't want to continue, will have some logic deep down that is not necessarily rational, it's just a logic that makes sense of the behaviour. And this is sometimes referred to as the secondary gain in the behaviour, meaning there's another reason for it. So the classic example would be if you would like to give up smoking because you'd like to be healthy, but you take up smoking again despite being over the addiction, the physical addiction. So what is it in the smoking that is serving you? And it can be something as simple as, when you are a smoker, you get to have a break that you otherwise don't get. You get to go out and be by yourself and breathe. And when you give up smoking, you also have to give up that break. So that could be a very simple secondary gain for someone who never gets to rest, who's always working. For example, parents of young children or single parents. So things like that, understanding that the behaviour, while seeming to be self-sabotage, is serving something at some level. And this one is incredibly profound. When someone is trying to make a change in behaviour they haven't been able to make alone, discovering the positive intent or secondary gain of the behaviour is often the key to helping them create that change. There is no failure, only feedback. This is one of my favourite presuppositions. So one of the stories that's often told with this is the story of Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb. And at the press conference, he revealed that he tried over 10,000 different substances to conduct the electricity as a filament for the light globe. And one of the reporters asked, how did it feel to fail 10,000 times? And he responded a little bit surprised and said, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I found 10,000 ways not to conduct the electricity for the light bulb. So you can hear in here that the frame that he had, which is a pretty common one in science, is not that you are failing, it's that you are learning, that you are constantly gathering information. And this frame is extremely powerful for innovation, creativity, and persistence. to achieve extraordinary things. So there is no failure, only feedback is a beautiful frame to take out into every area of your life, and to not see things as failures but only as more information. Now you know how not to do it. With reflective practice, your experience, if you remember, is your biggest source of learning. So it's only feedback and source of learning if you're not framing it as failure. If someone else can do it, I can too. This is a very basic statement. It reflects the principle or motivation of modelling excellence, which is core to NLP, which is if one person can do something awesomely, surely other people can do it too. It can be transferred. So we're also realistic about this. If it takes 10,000 hours in childhood to become a ballerina by a certain age, and then you want to be a ballerina at the age of 50 and you've never practiced, it's not likely to happen. However, what we're talking about is more realistic things. So if other people are able to make a living in their own business, why wouldn't you be able to do that too? If you have choice yourself of your own behaviours, then you can learn and do things differently if that's what you want. If what you are doing isn't working, do something else. This reflects something called the law of requisite variety from systems theory, which is that the most complex or flexible system wins. When two systems meet, the most complex system wins. So if what you're doing isn't working, do something else is a fundamental statement about the importance of flexibility. If the behaviour you're doing isn't giving you the outcome you want, if the map you have and the meaning you're making isn't giving you the outcome you want, do a different behaviour. Try to make a different meaning, because if you are more flexible, you are going to get the outcome. But just fighting in the rigidity to stay the same and make the external world fit you does not work. Memory, imagination, and real-time events use the same neurological circuits, meaning there is not different neural pathways for memory, imagination, and real-time events. At an unconscious level, our unconscious doesn't do time the way our conscious mind does it. And for this reason, we're able to create deep change with the unconscious mind with things like guided visualization and conversational hypnosis. So this presupposition really comes into understanding the power of those processes to be able to create change by kind of reprogramming, if you like, ourselves with particular techniques. Distinguish between the person and the behaviour. People are more than their behaviour. So this is particularly useful for understanding and giving feedback to other people, that if you collapse the behaviour with the person, and for example say you're a stupid child for doing that, this is quite different to saying that behaviour is stupid, or it is dangerous, or it is unsafe. You are okay, but that behaviour is unsafe, has an incredibly different impact on a child than saying you were stupid to do that, as in you are stupid at an identity level. So when giving feedback, it's very important to do separation of behaviour and identity. And when working with your coaching clients, remember the unconditional positive regard. We have unconditional positive regard for the fundamental humanness of the person we're working with, and we provide constructive criticism about behaviour. So we do not accept all behaviour as positive and useful. So how do we get to give challenging feedback or challenge behaviour while still having unconditional positive regard? Because we're able to separate the person from the behaviour. Martin Luther King once said about how to deal with racists, "I'm talking about a type of love which will cause you to love the person who does the evil deed while hating the deed that the person does." Isn't that beautiful? When you're able to separate people from the behaviour, it really allows you to keep your faith in human beings as well. And this presupposition applies, as they all do, especially to you. So if you say certain things about yourself, I am this or I am that, and they are not positive, I strongly suggest that you start thinking about separating out those traits or behaviours from who you fundamentally are.